day. Well, welcome back. This is Tom, and we're going to be talking about how to get started with AutoCAD 2019. And when you first install the software, and this happens to be the student version that you can get from students.autodesk.com, and if you are a student and you have a .edu email address, you're able to get it at no cost to use in your educational development. So when you first start, you'll actually choose the Start Drawing. There are other components about how to learn, some of the tutorials that are built within AutoCAD, and some of the creation features. But for today's talk, we're going to be talking about how to do the proper setup process to get a drawing started. So we'll get you off on the correct pathway in getting that rolling. So in essence, you'll just highlight Start Drawing, click there, and what will happen is that the drawing will actually pop up here. So I already had one set up here, and it creates the actual drawing surface. Now, if you're using a wheel mouse, if you roll the wheel, you'll notice that the grid changes perspective, and the little icon, the XY icon in the corner, also moves. And what that means is that you are magnifying and demagnifying the screen. It'll make more sense when there's actually an object on the screen, but bear with me. If you just roll the wheel up and back, you'll actually magnify and demagnify the drawing. Always magnify what you're working on. Don't stress your eyes. Don't try to guess at where the object might be when you're selecting it. Always magnify it. Make sure that you have the right selection being done. So today we're going to be talking about several specific setup items. And so one of the successful components over the years is I've created a basic pathway for everyone to follow. And that pathway starts out with setting up the units of the drawing, polar tracking or tracking of objects, object snaps, and layers. And so those four key items are set up for every drawing, and then there's some optional items that will actually be covering in future videos, which include dimension styles, text styles, and layout setup. And those are all key components in creating a successful drawing and getting these things set up properly so everything prints out properly or is shared through a PDF file and is visible. So let's get started with the basic structure of the screen, and then we'll actually get into the setup process. So the drawing screen is actually the model tab, and so this is where the model in the drawing is created from. You'll notice that at the very top you have what is known as a ribbon menu. And so this ribbon has a lot of different components in it, looks really busy, but if you break it down, it's in the specific areas. So we're going to talk about the drawing tools, the modify tools, annotation tools, layers, blocks, properties of objects, if we want to group objects into smaller category selections, utilities like measurements and gaining information on a drawing, copy and paste, which is an important tool to work between drawings and on a drawing, and then the different views that we can also work with. In addition to that, each ribbon, and this happens to be the home ribbon, there are also sub-ribbons for specific areas of inserting objects from other drawings. Annotation is dimensioning and notations. Parametrics is the ability to change object size based on the dimension that's typed in. This is basically a tool that is used inside Inventor and Fusion 360 and has now been brought into AutoCAD for several years. Different view menus that we can control how we're looking at our object. Drawing management, which is user interface tools and tool palettes. Output is plotting and printing components. Then there's add-in tools for apps that can be added. Drawing collaboration capabilities that are built into the software. Express tools. These have some pretty interesting, they've been around for quite a few years. Things like arced aligned text is kind of fun if you're using it for notations and drawings to make posters and things such as that. For mechanical and architectural drawings, not so much, but it is a cool way to have text shown. Same with break lines and super hatch and annotation attachment and so forth. These are tools that have been built into the software but are special tools outside of the standard annotation. And then other plug-in apps that you can use and grab from the Autodesk website. Some you do have to pay for as part of that process. So also on the screen, we have our drawing surface that we've kind of looked at and magnified and demagnified. We have the XY icon in the corner to tell you what direction you're working in, X being the red axis, Y being the green, and the Z axis is the blue axis that you're going to be seeing if and when you create a 3D object. The large object up here in the top right-hand corner is called the view cube. We use it for three-dimensional drawing capabilities and viewing objects in a perspective or 3D. All of the two-dimensional drawings that you create, you want to make sure that you're in the top mode. You can actually select top. If you click on one of the other arrows, it's going to flip the view cube around, and notice that we're now in the XZ icon. Y is no longer visible, but if we select the top, the XY icon is back visible again. And so you can spin this around, you can change the perspective orientation of the viewing with your drawing. And this is a consistent tool that you're going to see on almost all the Autodesk products. And so once you learn how to use the basics of the view cube, you can grab a corner and rotate it. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. Just to give you an idea of how to utilize it, you can rotate it by using the band, the ring around the outside. But in essence, it's fastest just to click on the side or the corner to get the view itself. There's other view helpers here. If you don't have a scrollable or a wheel mouse, I highly suggest to invest in one. It's only a few dollars. But if not, then there is a zoom command for magnification and demagnification that is found on this pop-up toolbar here on the right-hand side. So looking at the bottom of the drawing environment, you can see that we have you may have seen some scrolling text on the bottom of the commands that I've been using. Here we can actually type in the command prompts, or the commands will show up here. And I can also go back to a command history to see what I did to create the actual object. And then we've got a series of buttons and tools. We also have tabs here for model and layouts. So the model tab and the layout tabs, layouts are for printing, model is for drawing creation. We can add additional layouts, but there's only one model tab. So I can only create one drawing surface, but I can create multiple different views from that drawing surface. You'll notice that there's some buttons that have been highlighted here. And so these are buttons that are typically used in your drawing development. And some of them will apply to our object snaps and the creation of our polar tracking and some of the basic setup items that we'll get to here in just a minute. But these are our different buttons. They are on off, so they turn grids. Like this grid can be turned on and off. Let me go ahead and pan this over. By the way, if you press and hold the wheel, you'll notice that little hand there on the screen. That hand basically grabs the drawing and you're able to move it around. So that wheeled mouse is really important for productivity. But you can see I can turn the grid on and off. It's just an on-off button. So any of these blue buttons on the bottom here are basically on-off buttons. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've got 4 different topics that we're going to be covering in depth today. There are 3 additional items that we'll be looking at in future videos as part of the setup process when we're going to be placing dimensions or putting text on a drawing or getting ready to print. We'll address those at that point. So on your screen, here are the list of options that we're working with. All right, To get started, the first one is units. And so the units option is actually found under the big letter A up here in the top left-hand corner. And so that's also where we can save our drawings and save as. The difference is save as allows me to change the format and allows me to verify the name each time. If I just hit save, it's going to save it as the current name, and the current name right now is drawing1.dwg. Well, guess what? If every student saved, or if every individual saved their first drawing is drawing1.dwg, there'd be a lot of drawing ones out there. So you want to make sure that you do a save as and give it a unique name. So that way yours does stand out, not only on your computer system that you can search for, but also when someone else is viewing it. In addition to the ability to import and export work, we're going to actually be under drawing utilities for the units command. So it's the big A down to drawing utilities to units. And so the units command allows us to set up our drawing units in our drawing. And so you're thinking, well, but why aren't all the units the same? And they are, in the sense that we're creating a drawing. It's always drawn at full size, but we need to be able to display different units. And so those units will actually show up as XYZ positional information as we get started, but it's also used for us to have a relationship with the precision of our drawing environment. So first, the unit selections. We have architectural, decimal, engineering, fractional, and scientific. So which one is missing? Yeah, metric. There's no metric units. Well, metric is actually decimal. And so you can use decimal units for decimal inches, or you can use decimal units for millimeters or centimeters. You just tell it what it actually is as we get started. Precision. This is the level of accuracy that you can draw to. And so in decimal units, the default is 4 decimal places. Well, most companies are not going to create an object to 4 decimal places. It's too expensive. So instead, they'll work on objects that have 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places is most common. But you'll notice that we can go up to like 8 decimal places. Well, there's only a few places that get down to that level of precision. They're typically temperature, humidity, human controlled, meaning no humans can interact directly with the creation tools, because as we walk into a room, our body heat could change the size of the part when you're dealing with 8 decimal places. Or if we touch it, it definitely will change the size of the part. So in most cases, everybody works with 2 or 3 decimal places or 4, but 2 is the most common, and then it works up from there. Okay. From there, we also have the ability to change our style. So architectural units are in precision of feet and in fractional inches, and we can have different levels of precision. Well, if you're dealing with framing construction, if you have a 1/2 inch precision, you're doing pretty good. You kick it with your toe and it's close. But a 1/2 inch gap in a cabinet or between cabinets is unacceptable. So there you're looking at a precision level of about a 32nd. And if you're doing high-end woodwork, a 64th is highly precise. And again, that's very difficult to work towards in terms of that level of accuracy. And what's the difference? Well, the higher level of accuracy equals a higher cost basis for the object itself. Okay, we also have the ability to change angular degrees. So we can go decimal degrees, which is the most common in today's drawing environments. You might actually, if you dig up some older drawings back from the 80s or earlier, you'll actually see degrees, minutes, and seconds displayed or written on the drawing. And so you could actually replicate that. And if you're doing surveyor's units, you're going to get bearings such as north 0 degrees, 20 minutes, 15 seconds east. kind of setup. So you've got a variety of different settings again. And gradients and radians are our friends from trigonometry that we can use also. So again, it's all about what you need and how you apply it. And again, decimal degrees is the most common, and that's what you're going to be utilizing for both the architectural and mechanical drawing environment. Insertion scale, this deals with when we bring other drawings into our drawing. So our base drawing scale is going to be inches. We could choose feet, we could choose millimeters. So if we were doing a metric drawing, our base drawing scale would be millimeters. And so that way any drawing that gets inserted, even if it's an inch-based drawing, it will convert the size so that way it's all equal in actual scale. Oh, a lot of companies will cheat and go unitless. That's just the easy way out. You should actually set the base units so that way if drawings do come in with different unit bases, I guess that's a word, you will automatically have that conversion occur. Lighting, we're not going to worry about intensity of rendering and lighting at this point. We can also set directions because if you're doing mapping drawings, we can set the 0 degrees not only from east, but we can also click the north and 0 then becomes north, which is used for maps. For mathematics, for mechanical, and for architectural, 0 degrees is based on east, which is the right horizontal leg in a drawing. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set up basic decimal dimensions and 2 decimal places. And we'll choose OK. Congratulations, we're finished with our first setup step. That brings us to our second setup step, which is down here on the bottom. The second setup step is called polar tracking, which is the circle with the angle on it. And so the polar tracking has changed over the years. And so the cool thing now is with polar tracking, if I right mouse click on the icon, it comes up and gives me a lot of the common polar tracking settings. Now remember that the angle that we set was 0 degrees in units. And so we had no decimal places in the angle. So what we're dealing with polar tracking here is that are we going to work in angles of 5, 10, 15, 20, or angle degrees of 10, 20, 30, and that's going to lock in, or 15, 30, 45, 60, or 18, 36, 54. This is 22 and a half, not 23, so it's 22 and a half, but it's rounding to 23, to 45, to 67 and a half. And again, each one of these we can set up, and these are the lock-in angles. So right now it's 15, 30, 45, and 60. That's your default that you show up with. I typically set it for 5 degrees just because that will encompass more drawings that I create. And if it's something unique, like you want to make sure that it locks in every 2 degrees, you can actually go under track settings and then set up your increment angle right here. So you can set that to 2 degrees, and then every 2 degrees it will lock. And if you do that, you want to make sure that it remains absolute, that it's based on the 0 location, not incremental or to the last drawing segment. So from polar tracking, we move to the right and we go to object snap. So this is our third option that we're going to be working with. And again, we're going to right mouse click on object snap and we're going to go to the object snap tracking settings. And so object snaps happen when we want to select different parts of lines. And so I'll demonstrate here in just a second. Now the default that pops up may not look the same way on your screen as it does on mine. I've got mine already set up to show that I use endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, extension, perpendicular. I don't use tangent, and we'll show you why here in just a second, because I use center instead of tangent. And so that's the reason that I don't choose the tangent tool. So let me show you how this works real quickly. So we've got these object snaps set up, and we'll choose OK. I'm just going to draw a line, and just I pick the line command with the left mouse button, pick a point, and I pick a point, and it creates a line. Right mouse click and choose enter. So if I start a new line and I pick a point and I come over to this one, notice I get the green box. That green box is the endpoint. If I go beyond it, notice the dotted line that continues beyond my current position. That's extension. Remember, that was one of the settings that is turned on. We can also go to the middle of this line, and that's shown by a triangle. So triangles show the midpoint. And again, there's another endpoint on this end. Now center and midpoint, well, midpoints are here, but center and the, which one am I missing that I didn't demonstrate yet? Endpoint, midpoint, center. So center I haven't demonstrated. Intersection I haven't demonstrated. I knew there was one, and perpendicular. So let me go ahead and show you perpendicular. Perpendicular will show up. Notice the little L-shaped figure right there? That's perpendicular when it's 90 degrees to the surface. And intersection, so let's just draw here. And if I draw a line, I can select the intersection, which is an X. So I can select the intersection of the two objects. And so object snaps are a huge tool that you use extensively when you're creating your drawings. And so it saves you a lot of time. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get it as close as I can to the top of that line and draw another line. And you're thinking, well, that was really close. That looked excellent. But when you actually look at it and magnify it, it was not very good at all. So I was way off from where I needed to be at that intersection point. So again, object snap and object snap tracking are the two tools that you use. Object snap is used for one setting. Object snap tracking is turned on for all use. All right. And let me bring that back up. And what I did there is I double clicked on the wheel of the mouse and it magnified the screen to the maximum object size. And so object snap and object snap tracking are the two tools that you're going to go ahead and set up. And once you set these up, they should be set up for every drawing that you use on your computer. That's one of those settings that sticks with your computer settings as you launch AutoCAD. The other option here that's in blue is called annotation objects. And so annotation objects are scalable entities in AutoCAD, like dimensions or text are known as annotation objects. And so we'll get to more of those in a future video as we talk about dimensioning. And over here on this far right hand side, we've got graphics configuration with hardware acceleration. And it might be on, it might be off. Let the computer handle it. Don't force hardware acceleration on if you don't have a graphics card. You do need a separate graphics card to really do a good job with hardware acceleration based environments. So what other things can you do with the software on basic setup? Well, there is a command called layers. And so if you think about layers as sheets of paper stacked on top of each other that you can see through, that's the concept. I'm then able to grab a layer, move it off to the side, turn it off, turn it back on, that kind of thing. And it works out really, really well to control how I can see objects or manage objects in a drawing. So we're going to set up a few layers. We'll show you how to change an existing line to a new layer and how to draw a new line on a layer. And we're also going to cover the basics of how to create a basic line accurately. Because right now, all I did was pick line and pick some points. I have no idea how long these lines are, what angle they are at, none of that. I can tell if I start a line command, you'll notice that it tells me the length of the line, and it's also at 0, but you'll also notice that it locks in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 30. And that's all based on that polar tracking to lock in the angles. And the distance, I can get close, but to get it accurately, I actually need to type in the distance. So if I wanted a 3.5 inch line, I need to type in 3.50 and hit enter as the line is being created. So in this case, I'm going to create a 3.5 inch line at 30 degrees. And that line is 3.5 inches at 30 degrees. And the information that's being displayed now is for the new line that's being connected off of it. So the information that's on the screen will help us create accurate drawings. Okay, so let's set up layers. We do layer properties. And so with layer properties, we're going to go ahead and choose a new layer. And with the new layer, it's going to want us to give it a new name. Okay, you saw that I didn't have the layers on the previous screen, and now magically they appear. And so what happened was that I needed to restart AutoCAD and have the layers actually, the layer names then appear, because as I was clicking new layer, this was totally blank in this space. And so all I did was all I did was close the drawing and reopen the drawing, and the layer names reappeared. Again, that was just an odd configuration component. So if that happens, just close the drawing, reopen it, and everything should be good. So layers. When we click on a layer, we're able to double click and make that our current working layer. When you get the little gray box, let me also mention that I changed my box color from gray to white. To do that, to make that change, you can right mouse click, go down to options, and under display, you can choose the color scheme from light or dark. And so I can go dark and have the same options. And that's where we began before. So again, if I highlight layer 1, I can right mouse click and choose rename layer, or if I'm really good at double clicking, I can double click and do the same thing. So I'm going to create a layer called object. Layer 2 I'm going to rename to center. Layer 3 I'm going to rename to hidden. Layer 4 I'll rename to dimension. And so layer 5 I'm not going to use. But typically when I set up a drawing for mechanical use, I'll have an object layer, a center, a hidden line layer, and dimensions. And if I need any extra special layers, I can add those. There is no limit to the amount of layers you can create in AutoCAD, which is phenomenal. To get rid of a layer that you've created in Air, you can highlight the layer, and I believe the third button is the delete layer button. And so I just click on it and it deletes that layer. You also see that it now alphabetized all my layers based on the name. And so the object layer is my current layer. I highly recommend that you do not draw on layer 0, that you try to keep all your drawings on a separate layer. That way you can control it better. If everything's created on layer 0, you have absolutely no control about a drawing. The analogy that I use is that if you go grocery shopping, do you take your groceries home in one big giant bag that you can barely lift into your car? Or do you take it in a bunch of smaller bags that are easier to manage? And that's the whole concept behind layers, is to make things easier to manage for you, drawing components. So under center lines, we have the ability to turn layers, and if I scroll these, that's on and off. This one's freeze and thaw. This one is lock and unlock, and we have colors and line types and line weights. And so we're not going to go beyond that. Transparency, print and plot capabilities, so if you don't want a layer to plot out, and then viewport freezing and thawing, that's an advanced topic. Don't worry about it at this point in time. So on the center layer, it is turned on. A layer can be turned on or it can be turned off. And if it's turned off, it's not visible to the screen. when a layer is frozen, by the way, if we turn off a layer, you'll see that the light bulb goes off. Kind of cute. With the freeze and thaw, the thawed layer is the sunshine, and that means it's visible and operational. When you freeze it, it turns into a snowflake. And what's the difference between freeze and thaw and on and off? Well, the freeze and thaw doesn't allow us to calculate the data that's on that layer. So back in the early days, back in the 1980s in AutoCAD, the software was so far ahead of the hardware that you would get 10 and 15 minutes ahead waiting for the hardware to catch up by all the commands that you input in sequence. And so the software was so much faster than the hardware, we had the ability to freeze parts of our drawing so the hardware could stay closer to our speed of drawing creation. Then they came out with lock and unlock, which is basically and by the way, when you freeze something, you can't see it, so it goes away. Lock and unlock is like freeze and thaw, but it stays visible. So this is perfect for architectural work. If I draw a first floor plan, I can lock it. I can then draw the second floor plan on top of the first floor plan so my load-bearing walls all line up to make it easy for design. So lock and unlock is a great way to use for your drawing environment. We then have colors. And so I always pick green for center lines. Oh, by the way, you've got a huge amount of colors to choose from. And if you choose true color, you can pick any variation. And color books are like going to the hardware store and picking out paint samples. These are Pantone color cards. And so you can actually make that highly accurate coloring that's consistent from version to version. And that's what Pantone color cards allow you to do. But it's much like going to the paint store. So I always pick basic green for my center lines. And for center lines, I have to change the line type because the line type is not continuous. The line type needs to be a center line. So I click on the word continuous. It brings up select line type, but there's only continuous lines to select. But I do have the ability to load more line types. So we're going to go ahead and load, and when I scroll initially, you'll notice that I've got AutoCAD, ISO, and the whole key is that these are metric scaled line types. So these are all line types that are designed for metric level drawings. So they're 25.4 times the size that you need. What I typically recommend is that you use the lines that are word-based. If you can read them, you can use them. So we've got center, center 2, and center x2. Center is the base line type. Center x2 is half the scale, so there's twice as many dashes. And x2 is like going extra large or 2 times the original scale. I'm going to choose basic center. And when I do that, that loads the line. Remember, we only had continuous here. Now we've got continuous and center. I have to select it again to actually choose it to be used for the line type. The line weights, that's a really interesting capability. So object lines are typically thicker than center, dimension, and hidden lines. That's part of the standards for drawing and design. So I can actually go under my object line, I can select that layer, go under line type, and I can choose, under line weight, I said line type, I can choose the width of the line, but they're all in millimeters, but I thought I picked decimal and it's in inches. Well, if you've got a mechanical pencil, take a look at the diameter of the lead. Well, the diameter of the lead is going to be 0.05, or it might be 0.07, or it might be 0.13. So the diameter of the lead, 0.5, 0.7, 0.13, that kind of thing. The diameter of the lead is what predicates the width of the line when you physically draw using a mechanical pencil. Back in the early days, we sharpened pencils, and as pencils wore down, the points would get duller, so the line would get wider. Well, now with mechanical pencils, they're all the same width of line. And that's what it's based on. So if we use like a 0.5 millimeter, which is a standard pencil lead width, that line will show up as a thicker, darker line if we draw on it. So we've got these layers: center, dimension, hidden. Hidden lines I usually make red or blue. So I just pick the primary colors to work with. And again, if I'm working with a dark background, you want to pick lighter colors. So in essence, the blue is going to actually be a lighter blue so I can see it. And instead of a continuous line, it would be a hidden line. So we could load hidden lines. And again, there's 3 different hidden lines. Oh, did I mention that there are other special lines like hot water supply lines, tracks, zigzag, dash dots, divide, border lines, batting for insulation. So those are actual line types. Can you create your own line types? Absolutely. You can edit the AutoCAD.lin in Notepad, and you can customize a line type or create your own. So I'm going to go ahead and choose hidden, and we'll choose OK, and we'll choose hidden. Notice that now there's 3 lines loaded. So if I could pick center for the hidden line, but in reality is that I do want to pick hidden for the hidden line layer. And so ultimately you want to make sure that the line types match up with the names that you're working with. So now my layers are set up. We're ready to go. Let's go ahead and close this. So I can now choose different layers. Remember, we had the green check mark with the object layer, and that was the default layer that was showing up here on the top. So now this is kind of like a quick view layer capability. So I'll choose hidden, and we'll draw a line, and the hidden line should have dashes on it, and it does. And a center line would show up bright green with the center line structure of the line type. Now I can also take existing lines and change them to that environment. So if I click on this line, I get these blue dots. They're called grips. But you also see that I flip back to 0, and I can make this a hidden line by just changing it on the list. Hitting the escape key will get rid of the blue dots. So I can also pick a line and hit the delete key and delete it. So in this video, I've showed you a little bit about how to draw lines. Remember the point and shoot method, where we can point a direction and then type in the distance, and it works. So I can change the angle by using the by using the polar tracking. Object snaps to connect to existing objects using the green icons. And like I said, point and shoot. So if I want to draw a 2-inch line straight up, 2-inch, enter, 3 inches, 1 inch, straight down, 1 inch in, 1 inch down. Now if I need to draw a diagonal line, I can connect those back. So now I've got a 45-degree angle. Remember, 1 inch by 1 inch creates a 45-degree angle. I can then delete the old lines and hit enter, and we're all set. So there's our basic setup. As I said, we'll talk about the other setup tools for the layouts, the dimension styles, and text styles as we get into more advanced videos. Have a great day. Glad I was able to show you the layer snafu, but we're able to actually fix it by just restarting the software itself.